My son stood up at brunch and said, "I don't want your loser last name anymore. My new dad says you're a real man." So I handed him papers and said, "Sign here." 1 week later, the trust lawyer called my ex. "Ma'am, your son just forfeited his entire $2.3 million inheritance." Hey, Reddit. My 16-year-old son publicly disowned me at a family brunch, so I let him sign away his entire future. What followed was the most satisfying case of instant regret I've ever witnessed. It happened last Sunday at the Riverside Country Club. My son Brandon stood up in front of 23 people and announced he didn't want my last name anymore. "My new dad says you're a loser," he said, loud enough for the entire dining room to hear. "I want to take his name instead. The Harrison name actually means something." The room went dead silent. His step-cousin snickered. My ex-wife Nicole smiled like she'd just won the lottery. Her new husband Greg raised his glass in mock celebration. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I reached into my jacket, pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying for 3 months, and slid it across the white tablecloth. "Fine," I said calmly. "Sign here." Brandon hesitated for maybe 2 seconds before picking up the pen and scrawling his signature with an aggressive flourish. Didn't read it, didn't ask questions, just signed. Nicole raised her glass. "To Brandon Harrison, may you have the future you deserve." I lifted mine too. "To Brandon, may you get exactly what you just asked for." See, I wasn't blindsided by this performance. I'd seen it coming for months and had been preparing for this exact moment. I met Nicole when I was 28 and she was 26. She was working as an event coordinator for a hotel chain downtown, gorgeous and full of energy that drew people in. We met at an industry mixer. I was there representing Hartley Industrial Supply. She was organizing the event. We got married after dating for 2 years, had Brandon when I was 31, and for a while everything seemed perfect, like we'd figured out the formula everyone else was struggling with. I was building Hartley Industrial Supply, family business my grandfather started in 1967. We manufacture and distribute commercial welding equipment, industrial safety gear, and heavy machinery parts across the Southwest. Not glamorous work, but extremely profitable once you know what you're doing and build the right relationships. By the time Brandon was born, the company was pulling in about $8 million annually. I was working 80-hour weeks, managing 3 warehouses across Arizona and Nevada, personally handling our biggest accounts because our sales team couldn't close deals without messing up the pricing or making promises we couldn't keep. Nicole stayed home with Brandon, which was her choice, and one I supported. We had a nice house in a good neighborhood, 4 bedrooms, pool in the backyard, the whole suburban dream. Took vacations twice a year. Never worried about money. Brandon went to private school starting in kindergarten. Had every advantage a kid could want. But somewhere around year 10 of our marriage, Nicole decided this life wasn't enough. Started complaining I worked too much, that I cared more about welding equipment than our family, that I was always at the warehouse instead of home for dinner. Never mind that the welding equipment paid for the house, the car, the private school, the vacations, and the lifestyle she'd become very accustomed to. Never mind that I was building something substantial that would set our family up for generations. The real issue? She'd been having an affair with Greg Harrison for at least 8 months before I found out Greg runs a tech startup that's been about to go public for 5 years. One of those companies that's always 6 months away from the big breakthrough, always pivoting to a new market, always one funding round away from profitability, lots of venture capital funding, fancy office space in a trendy building downtown, ping pong tables and free snacks, and exactly 0 profits. But he drives a leased Tesla, wears expensive suits from brands I'd never heard of, and talks about disrupting markets and changing paradigms at cocktail parties. He's got the vocabulary down. Synergy, scalability, market penetration, revolutionary approach. All the buzzwords that make people think you're doing something important. Nicole was impressed. I was not. I found out about the affair when Brandon was 9. Came home early from a supplier meeting in Phoenix and found Greg's Tesla in our driveway at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Found them in our bedroom. The bedroom I paid for. In the house I bought. The divorce was ugly. Nicole wanted 50% of everything, full custody of Brandon, the house, and $6,500 monthly support payments. Her lawyer was aggressive, filing motions left and right, trying to paint me as an absent workaholic father who cared more about business than family. My lawyer was better. Cost me $85,000 in legal fees, but he was worth every penny. We settled after 9 months of legal warfare that made Thanksgiving dinner at my uncle's place extremely awkward. She got the house. I didn't fight her on it because I didn't want Brandon uprooted from his school and neighborhood. I kept the business free and clear, which was the part that really mattered. Joint custody. Brandon with her during the week, with me on weekends and summer support payments at $4,200 monthly until Brandon turned 18. All college expenses split 50-50, to be determined based on where he got accepted and what scholarships he earned. What she didn't get, what her lawyer fought like hell to access but couldn't touch, was the family trust. That stayed locked down tight under my control as sole trustee. The Hartley Family Trust was established by my grandfather in 1972 after the business really took off and he started making serious money. Smart man, my grandfather. He'd watched too many family businesses get torn apart by divorces, bad marriages, and kids who thought money grew on trees and would last forever. The trust holds about $2.3 million in assets: commercial real estate, diversified investments, life insurance policies, and controlling shares in Hartley Industrial Supply. It's structured so that direct descendants who maintain the Hartley name get access when they turn 25, with full distribution at 30. My grandfather built in protections after watching his own brother's family implode during a messy divorce. Spouses can't touch it. Doesn't matter if you're married for 50 years, the trust stays with blood relatives. Creditors can't touch it. It's protected from lawsuits and bankruptcy. And this is the important part that becomes relevant later. If a descendant voluntarily renounces the family name, they forfeit all claims to the trust forever. No appeals, no second chances, no takesbacks. When my parents died in a car accident 7 years ago, drunk driver hit them head-on Highway 17. I became sole trustee. Brandon was the only direct descendant in his generation, which meant eventually that entire $2.3 million would be his when he turned 25, plus whatever the business was worth when I retired, which conservative estimates put at another $4 to $5 million. Nicole knew about the trust. She'd tried multiple times during the divorce to get access to it, or at least get it counted as marital assets when calculating the division of property. Her lawyer argued that Brandon's future inheritance should factor into custody and support calculations, that my access to the trust gave me an unfair financial advantage. My lawyer shut that down hard, brought in estate planning experts who testified that the trust existed independent of our marriage, couldn't be divided in divorce proceedings, and Brandon's future inheritance had zero relevance to current support obligations. The trust was established decades before Nicole and I even met. The judge agreed. Nicole was furious. Her lawyer filed 2 appeals that went nowhere, but there was nothing she could do about it. After the divorce finalized, things were relatively normal for about a year. Brandon stayed with me every weekend. We'd go to baseball games at Chase Field, work on his car together in my garage. I'd bought him this old Honda Civic that needed work, and we were restoring it together. We'd talk about his plans for college, what he wanted to study, where he might want to live. He wanted to study engineering, maybe come work at the company eventually. We'd talk about different types of engineering, mechanical, electrical, industrial, and how they all played roles in manufacturing. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding how things worked, how they were built. Then Nicole married Greg, and everything changed. The change in Brandon was gradual but relentless, like watching a plant slowly die from root rot. First, it was small stuff. He started copying Greg's haircut, this overly styled thing that required expensive product and looked ridiculous on a teenager. The kind of haircut that works on a 40-year-old executive trying to look younger, but makes a 15-year-old look like he's playing dress-up. Then the clothes changed. Suddenly, he needed designer hoodies that cost $200, limited edition sneakers that cost $300 a pair, and required entering online raffles to even have a chance to buy brands I'd never heard of, but apparently were essential for his image. Greg says presentation matters, Brandon told me when I questioned why he needed $300 shoes for school. Successful people invest in their image. It's about signaling that you're serious. Greg runs a company that's never turned a profit, but sure, let's take fashion advice from him. Then came the comments about my work. And these weren't just casual observations. They were pointed criticisms clearly fed to him by someone else. Greg says manufacturing is dying. The future is tech and innovation. Physical products are obsolete. Greg says people who work with their hands are limiting themselves. Real wealth comes from ideas, not labor. Greg says you have to think bigger than just running a warehouse. You need to scale, disrupt, find the inefficiencies in the market. I run a $12 million operation with 47 employees and contracts with every major construction company in 4 states. We supply safety equipment to 3 mining operations and provide welding gear to manufacturers across the Southwest. Greg runs a company that survives on investor money and has laid off staff 3 times in 2 years. But sure, I'm the one limiting myself. The disrespect started creeping in during his sophomore year. He'd show up late to our weekend visits, sometimes 2 or 3 hours late, with barely an apology, or he'd cancel altogether with an hour's notice. I have plans with Greg's family became his standard excuse. Sometimes it was Greg's nephew's birthday party. Sometimes it was a networking event Greg was bringing him to. Sometimes it was just hanging out at their house because they were doing something important. When I'd call him out on it, Nicole would text me long lectures about not being controlling and understanding that Brandon was growing up and needed space to develop his own identity, that I needed to respect his choices and not force my expectations onto him. My expectations being that he show up when he committed to something revolutionary concept. I know. Last summer was supposed to be our time. We'd planned for months to drive to Colorado, do some hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, visit some college campuses, Boulder, Colorado State, Colorado School of Mines. I'd been looking forward to it for half a year. Booked hotels, planned the route, researched hiking trails. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, Brandon texted, "Actually, Greg's taking us to Hawaii. His company is having a retreat there, and I'm going. We can do Colorado another time." Another time never came. I spent that week working extra hours at the warehouse, reorganizing the inventory system, because what else was I going to do? By fall of his sophomore year, the contempt was barely hidden anymore. He'd correct me in public, rolling his eyes when I'd talk about work or explain something. Started calling my truck that old thing, even though it was a 2019 F-250 that cost $47,000 and was the most reliable vehicle I'd ever owned. He'd FaceTime me from Greg's house, always making sure to pan the camera around their renovated kitchen with the marble countertops, or their home theater setup with the massive screen and surround sound system. Check out what Greg just installed. Pretty sick, right? Must be nice having money for upgrades. The implication being that I, running a multi-million-dollar company, somehow didn't have money for nice things I had money. I just didn't see the point in spending $15,000 on a home theater when a regular TV worked fine. Nicole would be in the background, smiling like she'd won something. Like every nice thing in Greg's house was proof she'd made the right choice leaving me. The breaking point for me, the moment I decided I needed to prepare for the worst, came in December at parent-teacher conferences. Brandon's school was having their evening, where parents meet with teachers to discuss progress and grades. I showed up at the scheduled time, 6:30 p.m. Thursday. I'd left work at 5, fought rush hour traffic for 40 minutes, and walked into the classroom to find Nicole, Greg, and Brandon, already sitting there. The teacher, Mrs. Anderson, looked confused when I walked in. "Oh," she said, glancing between me and Greg. "I wasn't expecting... Are you Brandon's father?" Before I could answer, Brandon said, "That's my biological father, this is my dad." He pointed at Greg. Greg didn't correct him. Didn't say, "Actually, I'm his stepfather," or "We're both important in his life," or any of the things a decent person would say. He just smiled and shook Mrs. Anderson's hand like he was the only parent who mattered. Nicole beamed like Brandon had just won a Nobel Prize. The teacher looked uncomfortable but moved forward with the conference anyway. She clearly didn't want to get in the middle of whatever family drama was unfolding in her classroom. For the next 30 minutes, she discussed Brandon's grades. Solid B plus average, strong in math and science, weaker in English and history. She talked about his college prospects. Good. With his GPA and test scores, he'd have options. She mentioned his future plans. Apparently, Greg had been mentoring him on entrepreneurship and business development. Every single time Mrs. Anderson addressed me directly, Brandon would interrupt and redirect the conversation to Greg. Actually, Greg helped me with that project. Greg explained that concept to me. Greg thinks I should focus on business classes instead. I sat there for 30 minutes, being systematically erased from my son's life, while his mother and stepfather nodded approvingly. On the drive home, alone in my truck, I called my estate attorney. William Patterson has been the family lawyer since my grandfather's time. He's 67 now, semi-retired but still handling the Hartley family business because, in his words, "Your grandfather saved my life once, and I'll never stop repaying that debt." The story there is that my grandfather gave William's father a job during the recession of the early 80s when no one else would hire him. That job kept the Patterson family afloat, put William through law school, and created a loyalty that's lasted 40 years. When I explained what I wanted to do, William was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, thinking. "Jonathan," he finally said. You're sure about this? Once Brandon signs, it's permanent. The trust language is ironclad. Your grandfather made sure of that. There's no reversal clause, no forgiveness provision, no way to undo it. I'm sure if he wants to walk away from this family, he can walk away from everything that comes with it. And if he comes back later, years from now, realizes what he gave up, Then he'll have learned a valuable lesson about reading legal documents before signing them and thinking before making permanent decisions. William sighed. All right, but I need to make sure you understand what you're doing. This isn't just about money. You're closing a door that can never be opened again. Brandon will never be able to access the trust, no matter what happens. Even if he changes his name back, even if Nicole and Greg divorce, even if he comes crawling back admitting he made a mistake. The clause is absolute. I understand. And you're okay with that? William, he stood in front of his teacher and said, I'm not his father. He's been treating me like an inconvenience for 2 years. This isn't sudden. This is the culmination of a pattern. I'm just giving him what he clearly wants. Freedom from the Hartley name and everything associated with it. We spent 3 weeks drafting the paperwork. William is meticulous, and he wanted this document to be absolutely airtight. We went through 7 revisions, with William bringing in 2 other estate attorneys to review it and make sure there were no loopholes. The document was elegant in its simplicity, a formal declaration of name change and renunciation of the Hartley family name, standard legal language about petitioning the court for official name change, acknowledgement of understanding the permanent nature of the decision, notarized signature line, witness requirements. What wasn't in the document, what Brandon would never think to look for, was how it would trigger Clause 14.7 of the family trust. My grandfather had inserted that clause specifically to prevent situations where someone married into the family convinced a descendant to change their name through manipulation or coercion, and then tried to claim inheritance rights under a different name. He'd seen it happen to a business associate and was determined it wouldn't happen to the Hartley family. The clause was buried on page 34 of a 47-page trust document written in dense legal language that required an estate attorney to fully understand. The key phrase was, any descendant who voluntarily renounces the Hartley family name through legal proceedings shall immediately and irrevocably forfeit all rights, privileges, and claims to the Hartley family trust and associated assets. Voluntary renunciation, legal proceedings, immediate and irrevocable forfeiture. I'd known about this clause since I was 25 when I became a beneficiary myself. My father sat me down before I got access and made me read every single word of that trust document 3 times. Made me explain each clause back to him to prove I understood. Made sure I knew exactly what I was entitled to and what could cause me to lose it. Son, he'd said, this trust represents 4 generations of Hartley family work. Your great-grandfather started with nothing. Your grandfather built it into something substantial. I've protected it and grown it. Someday you'll do the same. But you need to understand, it's not just money. It's a responsibility, and it's conditional on maintaining the family name and honoring what it represents. Brandon had never asked to see the trust documents. Not once. Never showed any interest in understanding how the family money worked or what he'd eventually inherit. Nicole had tried during the divorce, but gave up when her lawyer told her it was a waste of time and money to fight it. Greg definitely didn't know anything about it. He assumed all family money was fair game, regardless of whose name was on the trust. William prepared 3 copies of the renunciation document. 1 for my records, 1 for Brandon to keep, 1 for the trust file. He also prepared a detailed memorandum documenting the execution of Clause 14.7 to be filed immediately upon Brandon's signature. You'll need witnesses, William advised. The more credible, the better. This needs to be airtight if anyone challenges it later. Which they will. Don't worry, I told him. I know exactly when and where this is happening. The beautiful thing about William's work was how clean everything was. No loopholes, no gray areas, no room for creative interpretation. The renunciation document did exactly what it said on the first page. Allowed Brandon to legally petition for a name change from Hartley to Harrison. What it didn't mention anywhere in the document itself was the automatic trigger built into the trust that had existed for 50 years. We weren't hiding anything. The trust documents were public record if anyone bothered to look. We were just letting Brandon make an informed choice about whether to read legal documents thoroughly before signing them. Something every adult should do. Something I'd taught Brandon to do since he was 12. Always read contracts before you sign, I'd told him dozens of times. Never let someone pressure you into signing something you haven't reviewed. Apparently, he'd forgotten that lesson. Nicole had been planning this brunch for weeks. It was supposed to be a celebration of Greg's company reaching a major milestone, which apparently meant they'd secured another round of Series C funding to cover their operational losses for 6 more months and delay the inevitable. She invited her entire extended family, 3 sisters, their husbands, their kids, Greg's parents and siblings, a few of their country club friends who'd been watching the successful blended family with admiration. 23 people total, gathering at the Riverside Country Club at 11 a.m. on Sunday for champagne brunch and celebration. I was invited too. probably because excluding me would have looked bad and raised questions. Or maybe Nicole wanted me there to witness her perfect new life with her successful husband and their happy blended family. Either way, the invitation came with a note. Brandon would really like you to be there. This is important to him. Brandon texted me Friday night. Brunch Sunday at Riverside. You coming? Wouldn't miss it, I replied. And I meant it. I'd been carrying those papers in my jacket for 6 weeks. Waiting for the right moment, public declaration seemed fitting. That Sunday morning, I dressed in my usual weekend attire. Nice jeans, button-down shirt, leather boots. I wasn't trying to compete with Greg's designer outfit or Nicole's expensive dress. I was comfortable being exactly who I was. A guy who built things, ran a successful business, and didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I arrived at 11:15, fashionably late. The group was already seated at a long table on the patio overlooking the golf course. Nicole at one end with Greg beside her, both of them holding court, Brandon next to them, looking uncomfortable in a suit jacket that was definitely too expensive for a teenager. I took a seat at the opposite end, nodded to a few family members I recognized from past holidays, and ordered coffee when the server came by. For the first hour, everything was standard country club brunch material. People talking about golf handicaps, upcoming vacations to Cabo and Hawaii, complaining about their contractors and landscapers, discussing whatever else wealthy people discuss over eggs, Benedict, and mimosas. Greg held court at his end of the table, explaining his company's revolutionary approach to cloud-based solutions for enterprise clients, using phrases like disrupting the B2B space and leveraging AI-driven analytics, and creating synergistic partnerships. Half the table was nodding like they understood what any of that meant. I ate my omelet and checked work emails on my phone. One of our suppliers was having delivery issues, and I needed to coordinate with the warehouse manager about rerouting a shipment. Then Greg stood up and tapped his glass, and I want to thank everyone for coming. We're celebrating not just our company's success, but family. He put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. This young man has become like a son to me. He understands what it takes to build something meaningful. Not just running an established business, but creating something new. The dig at me was clear. Nicole beamed. Brandon looked proud. In fact, Greg continued, Brandon and I have been talking about legacy, about what names really mean, and he's made a decision you'll all want to hear. Brandon stood up. I knew what was coming. My hand went to the envelope in my jacket. I've been thinking about who I want to be, Brandon started, voice shaky. The Harrison family represents the kind of future I want. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. My biological father he's a good guy, but he's stuck in the past, working in manufacturing, living small. That's not who I want to be. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Nicole squeezed Greg's hand, tears forming. Greg has shown me what real success looks like. He's taught me more about business in 2 years than I learned in 16 years. So I've decided I don't want the Hartley name anymore. I'm changing my last name to Harrison. Legally. Greg is my real dad now. The silence was deafening. Greg hugged Brandon. I'm so proud of you, son. Nicole started crying happy tears. A few of Greg's relatives actually applauded. I calmly reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope, walked down to Brandon's end of the table, placed it in front of him, set my pen beside it with a soft click. Fine, I said evenly. Sign here. Brandon looked confused. What is this? Legal name change and renunciation documents. If you're serious, make it official. Right now. Greg picked up the papers and skimmed them. It's legit. Standard name change stuff. Nicole frowned. Why do you have these ready? I knew it was coming. I'd been watching him pull away for 2 years. So, Brandon, are you serious or just performing? That hit a nerve. Brandon's face flushed. He grabbed the pen. I'm serious. Read it first, I suggested calmly. It's a legal document, has consequences. He skimmed maybe 3 sentences before signing with an aggressive flourish. There, done, I'm not your son anymore. I took the document and put it back in my jacket. Noted. Then I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the entire table. Documentation. You'll want to remember this day. I looked at Brandon. We all will. I raised my glass of orange juice. To Brandon, may you get exactly what you just asked for. The toast felt heavy. Greg raised his champagne high, smiling like he'd won. Then I left. Drove straight to William's office. William was waiting when I arrived at his office. I handed him the signed document, still warm from my jacket pocket. My hands were steady. I'd been preparing for this moment for months. He actually did it, William said, examining the signature carefully. In front of witnesses? 23 of them. Some were filming it for social media. I got photos of the whole table with timestamps. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant, who was standing by even though it was Sunday. Margaret, I need you to execute Clause 14.7 immediately. Yes, Sunday. I'll send you the signed renunciation right now. Contact all the relevant institutions first thing Monday morning. He hung up and looked at me with something like sadness, mixed with professional satisfaction. This is going to hit them fast. Are you ready for what comes next? I've been ready for 3 months. Nicole's going to lose her mind. Greg's going to try to find a way out. Brandon, he paused. Brandon's going to realize very quickly what he's done. You sure you want to watch that? I need to see it through all of it. William nodded slowly. All right. Margaret will have everything processed by Monday morning. The automatic systems will start triggering. As soon as the renunciation is logged into the trust database, I'll document everything for the file. What should I expect? Phones calls. Lots of them. Threats. Legal posturing. Nicole's lawyer will try to find an angle. They won't find one, but they'll try. My advice? Don't answer. Let it all come to me. I'll handle the legal side. You just be ready for the emotional fallout. By Monday morning at 8 a.m., Margaret had already started the process. The systems that Brandon had taken for granted his entire life began shutting down like dominoes. The Hartley Legacy Scholarship, a fund my grandfather established in 1975 specifically to cover college expenses for family descendants, automatically revoked Brandon's access the moment the renunciation was logged in the system. The fund was worth $86,400, enough to cover 4 years at any state university plus living expenses. The account showed his name grayed out, access denied, balance forfeited. His student portal at Canyon Ridge Preparatory School updated overnight. Where it had previously shown a modest balance due of $2,100 for incidental fees, it now showed $22,800 due immediately for spring semester tuition. The Hartley Family Endowment had been covering 70% of his private school tuition since 9th grade, $16,200 per semester. Without that, the full cost landed on Nicole. The health coverage I'd been maintaining for him through the company plan, separate from the support payments and not required by the divorce decree. Terminated not illegal since he was over 16, and my only obligation was through Nicole's policy per the divorce agreement. The car I'd been planning to give him for his 17th birthday, a fully restored 2020 Honda Civic I'd already purchased and had been keeping in storage, planning to surprise him with it, got donated to a local trade school's automotive program. They'd teach underprivileged kids how to maintain and repair it. The seed money I'd promised him for his first business venture, $25,000 set aside in an account specifically earmarked for Brandon once he turned 21, meant to help him start whatever business he dreamed up, got redistributed back into the general trust fund. But the big one, the one that really mattered, his position as primary beneficiary of the Hartley Family Trust, vanished completely. That $2.3 million inheritance, gone. The future ownership stake in Hartley Industrial Supply worth an estimated $4.2 million, gone. The property rights, investment accounts, life insurance policies, everything tied to being a Hartley descendant, all of it, gone with the stroke of his pen. By Tuesday afternoon, Nicole's phone rang. William recorded the call per standard legal protocol. He sent me the transcript later. William, Mrs. Harrison, this is William Patterson, legal counsel for the Hartley Family Trust. I'm calling to confirm your son Brandon's voluntary renunciation of the Hartley family name, executed Sunday at approximately 12:47 p.m. Nicole. Excuse me? What are you talking about? William. Your son signed legal documents formally renouncing the Hartley name. As a direct result, Clause 14.7 of the Hartley Family Trust has been executed. Brandon is no longer listed as a beneficiary. Nicole. That's insane. He's 16. That signature isn't legally binding. William. California law permits minors aged 16 and older to petition for name changes with parental consent or judicial approval. Your son signed voluntarily in front of 23 witnesses, several of whom recorded the event. The renunciation is valid. Nicole. His college fund. His inheritance. Jonathan can't just take that away. William. Mr. Hartley didn't take anything. Your son voluntarily relinquished his rights by renouncing the family name. This is outlined in trust documents established in 1972, long before your son was born. Nicole. But he didn't understand what he was signing. William. According to multiple witnesses, Mr. Hartley explicitly told Brandon to read the document carefully. Brandon chose not to. That's not Mr. Hartley's responsibility. Nicole. There has to be something we can do. An appeal. A lawsuit. William. The trust language is ironclad, reviewed by multiple legal experts over 5 decades. There is no mechanism for appeal or reversal. Your son made a permanent decision. Nicole. I want to speak to Jonathan now. William. Mr. Hartley has asked me to handle all communications. If you wish to pursue legal action, consult your own attorney. The call ended with Nicole screaming. By Wednesday, Brandon had figured out something was wrong. He texted me at 11:47 p.m. Dad, what happened to my scholarship? I didn't respond. Thursday morning, the school's finance office called Nicole about the outstanding tuition. She called me 6 times in 2 hours. I let every call go to voicemail. Message 1, confused. Message 2, angry. Message 3, threatening legal action. Message 4, desperate. Message 5, crying, begging. Message 6, venomous, promising I'd regret this. I deleted all 6 without responding. Friday brought its own karma. Greg's Tesla got repossessed right in their driveway at 9:30 a.m. Brandon watched as the tow truck hauled it away. Turns out Greg's latest funding round had fallen through. Investors discovered that after 5 years, the company had burned through $12 million. With no path to profitability, Greg had been making lease payments with a maxed-out credit card. That night, Brandon called me directly. Dad? His voice was small. Scared. Can we talk, please? Something's wrong with all my accounts and I don't understand. You signed a legal document, Brandon. Actions have consequences. But I thought it was just a name change. I didn't know. I told you to read it carefully. In front of everyone, you chose not to. Please, I made a mistake. Can we fix it? No, we can't. You made your choice. Now live with it. But I'm your son. You made it very clear on Sunday that you're Greg's son now. Ask him to help you. I hung up. The following week, Nicole filed for an emergency custody modification, claiming I was financially abusing Brandon. The hearing was set for Wednesday at 2 p.m. My lawyer destroyed their argument in 20 minutes. He presented the trust documents, the signed renunciation, the video from Facebook, showed witness statements confirming I'd told Brandon to read before signing. The judge, a woman in her 60s, reviewed everything carefully, then looked at Nicole's lawyer with barely concealed disdain. Counselor, your client's son made an adult decision in front of 24 witnesses. He signed a legal document without reading it despite being explicitly told to do so. The trust language is clear. Established decades ago, I see no grounds for modification here. But, Your Honor, he's 16. He's 16, not 6. At 16, California law grants significant autonomy. If he was mature enough to publicly reject his father, he's mature enough to live with the consequences. Motion denied. The gavel came down with finality. By week 3, Nicole and Greg's financial situation had collapsed. Without Brandon's scholarship, they owed $68,400 in tuition through graduation money they didn't have. Greg's company officially laid off 70% of staff and moved to remote-only, corporate speak for, we can't afford office space. They tried pulling Brandon from Canyon Ridge, but there were boundary issues. The closest public school had a waiting list of 83 students. Meanwhile, the house Nicole got in the divorce needed an $18,000 roof. Her homeowner's insurance had lapsed 3 months earlier because she'd been using that money to cover expenses, planning to pay it when Greg's funding came through. The funding that never happened. Brandon tried reaching out multiple times. Texts that went from apologetic to desperate to angry to pleading even showed up at my office one afternoon. There's a young man in the lobby asking to see you, security called. Brandon Harrison? I asked. He says he's your son. He's not on the approved visitors list. Please escort him out. I watched from my office window as security walked him to his car. The family gathering happened in early April, about 7 weeks after the brunch. My Uncle Richard hosts an annual spring thing at his ranch outside Tucson. About 40 relatives, big cookout. The whole experience, Brandon showed up with Nicole, both trying to act normal. They arrived in Nicole's Honda CR-V. She'd sold her Lexus to cover expenses. Brandon wore regular clothes instead of designer stuff. People were polite but distant. They were there, but they weren't family anymore. Halfway through the afternoon, a courier service truck pulled up. A guy got out and asked if Brandon Harrison was present. The entire gathering went quiet. That's me, Brandon said, confused. The courier handed him a large manila envelope. Brandon stood there holding it while everyone watched. Open it, someone said. Brandon tore it open. Inside was a detailed document on official letterhead from the Hartley Family Trust. He started reading. His face went white, then red, then white again. The first page was a cover letter. Hartley Family Trust, official revocation notice. The second page was itemized every single thing he'd forfeited. Hartley Legacy Scholarship Fund, revoked, $86,400. Tuition endowment, Canyon Ridge. Prep, revoked, $32,400 annually. Health coverage, terminated. Vehicle allocation, 2020 Honda Civic, redistributed. Seed Investment Fund, revoked, $25,000. Primary beneficiary status, Hartley Family Trust, revoked, $2,317,500. And lots of other things. Total forfeited value, $7,511,300. That night after the ranch, Greg finally broke his silence. Nicole told me this later through her lawyer. They were at dinner in their rental townhouse. Brandon was devastated, crying about losing everything. Greg was eating leftover takeout, scrolling through his phone. "Greg," Nicole said, "say something. Help him." Greg looked up, shrugged. "Well, that's rough, but you'll figure it out, kid." Not, "we'll figure it out." Just, "you'll figure it out." Brandon looked at him with tears streaming. "But you said you'd treat me like your own son." "I did treat you like my own son," Greg replied, going back to his phone. "But come on, Brandon. You're not actually my responsibility. That stuff with your family, that's between you and them. But you told me to change my name. I said if that's what you wanted, you should do it. Your choice, man. But the consequences? That's on you." Brandon saw it clearly for the first time. Greg had loved the idea of stealing another man's son. The ego boost. The symbolic victory. But now that it came with actual consequences, not so interesting anymore. Brandon had traded a father who'd given him everything for a man who'd given him nothing but empty words. The final piece came 2 months later. Brandon turned 17 in August, and my child support obligation officially ended. That $4,200 monthly payment stopped. Nicole had been counting on that money. She called me at 9 p.m., desperate. "Jonathan, please, just keep paying support until he graduates. Just one more year." "No, he's your son. He made it very clear he's not." "I'm respecting his choice. Greg can't afford." "That's not my problem. You chose him. Brandon chose him. Live with it. And we're going to lose the house." "Then you should have thought about that before encouraging our son to publicly disown me for a guy with a leased Tesla and a failing startup." I hung up. They sold the house in September, moved into a rental townhouse in Tempe. Brandon had to switch schools mid-semester to Gilbert High because of district boundaries. Greg's company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in October. Complete liquidation. Greg found work as a project manager at someone else's startup, making about $85,000, a quarter of what he'd claimed before the Tesla was long gone. He drove a 2014 Toyota Camry now. Brandon tried reaching out one final time in November. Long email about understanding what he'd lost, how he'd been manipulated, how he was sorry, how he wanted to make things right. I read it carefully. Then I replied with one sentence. "You're a Harrison now. Harrisons figure things out on their own." Then I blocked his email. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.